We're jumping into the next section. We, just so you know where we've been, we looked at generally, what is the, what is the will of God, and we started with Romans chapter 12, verse number 2, and we saw there that we're going to be able to know the will of God. So, this question, what is the will of God? How do we find it? Those are both questions that we're meant to have answers to. And so, how do we get those answers? Well, we look at these other things. First thing that we landed on was that it's God's will that we do good works. This is absolutely the will of God. So it's never God's will that we sit around in church waiting for the rapture to happen. But it's always God's will that as we're sitting around in church waiting for the rapture to happen, that we're doing good works. God wants this. This is part of His desire for us. So that was the first specific thing that we learned about the will of God. Then tonight we're on this starting place. This is the verse we're looking at. It's out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should. Oh, what? I missed something there, didn't I? That each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable. For God did not call us to be impure, but to live a holy life. Now, there's a couple of ellipses in there, which means that I put the parts of the verse in there that were of specific notice for us tonight, or note for us tonight, and there's a few things that are in between there. We'll talk about one of them, but not all of it. It should read, where it says that it's God's will that you be sanctified. That's not really a good way to translate that. It doesn't make sense with the grammar in the Greek. It should read this way, for this is the will of God, your sanctification. And, I think King James is really close to that. A few other English translations are very close to that as well, but that's what's there in the Greek. Why is that a big deal? Mainly because if you read the English that we do have, like in the NIV here, you can get the idea that this is talking about something that's passive. To be sanctified. That has a passive connotation to it, and that is not at all what's meant in the text. It's not meant to convey something passive in regards to this issue with God's will. This is something that's meant to be conveyed as something that is our responsibility, something that is our action, our activity. God doesn't do this for us, we do this. It's not that we don't do it without God's help. It's not that we don't do it without the strength and the help of God. But it's something that we still do. It's not something that is done for. I think it can give, not necessarily does it absolutely give the wrong impression, but I think that it certainly can. So it should read, for this is the will of God, your sanctification. Sanctification, what does that mean? It means being set apart as God's. When we say that we have sanctification, it's not something you can hold in a hand. It's not tangible. It's not one of those kinds of things. It's talking about a state of mind and heart. And so when we talk about sanctification in this regard, we have a state of mind and heart in which we see ourselves as set apart unto God. We're God's. And that's a pretty serious thing when you think about it. To have that kind of point of view. It should be our point of view. It's God's will that it would be our point of view. But this is the point of view that in being in God's will for our sanctification we need to have. We're set apart as God's. That comes in really strong when you think about the kind of conditions we're living in today. Because in this world today, there is nothing sacred in the world around us anymore. Maybe 100 years ago, if you were living in America, society would give you a little bit of help with this. Not much, but at least a little. But today, does society give you any help at all? Being set apart as God's? No, it's totally dead set against God. Everything that's going on around us the way people think, the things that they go after, how they relate to each other, how they deal with what's in the world. It's like, it's the exact opposite of what God would do, what God wants us to do. And so we don't get any help in this in our day and age from the world around us. 100 years ago, was it all that hard to not be, totally given over to wantonness and debauchery? Because there was a lot of people that lived, as they used to say, God-fearing, decent Christian lives. But today, does anyone think that way? Does anyone in the church think that way? That's one of the biggest problems, right? Do we even see that kind of stench that's in the world around us seeping into church life? Certainly we do. I mean, the standards in church life have come down. Not that we're legalist or anything else like that, but I mean, this is God's will, our sanctification. And, so this is not something that is something you can slough off, not think about, and say, oh, that's just old-fashioned. It's God's will. And we need to keep this in our mind. Now, this part of the text, after that first ellipsis up there, after that first sanctified, in the actual text in your Bibles, you'll find there that it does bring up the specific issue of sexual purity. And this is what was most in focus. Now, at the time that Paul was writing this, we're back in the 50s, late 50s AD. The Greek and Roman worlds, which that's where Paul was running. This was written to the Thessalonians, so Thessalonica was in Greece. That was part of the Greek world. At this point in time, Paul's gotten his exposure to the Roman world as well. But no matter really where you went in the Roman Empire, whether you were in like the Latin influenced aspect in the West, or you were the Greek, the Greek influenced aspect of the Roman Empire in the East, both of those cultures had a very debauched and base viewpoint of sex. It was even part of the religious rites. And so, you had prostitutes in temples. This was just part of when they had festivals and, like bacchanals and things of that nature, they were just debauched and debased, drunken, sexually promiscuous, just terrible things. And for the Romans, whose practice of slavery was quite extensive, they just had no problems with using people like as basically sexual props, sexual toys. So that was the world in which Paul was, winning converts at them. And sometimes when converts, come out of those kinds of lifestyles, at some point in time, they can maybe kind of get a little thought that I wish I were back, or I kind of miss this, those kinds of things. And so, Paul was very, as an apostle, as someone trying to build the church, plant the church, and help people stay in the middle of God's will. He really, pressed how important it was to maintain sexual purity, because they did not have that concept at all, neither the Romans nor the Greeks. So this is specifically talking about sexual gratification outside of marriage. See the Greek word there. What does that word look like? It looks like pornography and porn and all those kind. They all come from this root, so they all dwell in that. The general concept sometimes, particularly in King James, is translated with the word fornication. Fornication, it's an old-fashioned word. Doesn't get used much anymore. What is it talking about? It's talking about sex outside of marriage. I would say with the generality that Paul gets to in between the second ellipsis and the last phrase, that I think that he was going for something that was even a little more broad and a little more generalized than just sexual sexual activity with like a prostitute. Now technically, that's really what the word most foundationally means. But the way that Paul frames it in its use in this particular text, he's talking about something a little more. So he's not telling Christian people, don't go to prostitute. He is saying that. But the way that he's using this word in the context that he's using it, he's trying to draw, he's trying to draw a little broader of an application to virtually any kind of illicit sexual gratification. So he's saying, don't do this. This is not God's will for you. God's will for you is to avoid that kind of thing. So the action in this aspect of sanctification is ours and not God's. So God's not going to make you sexually pure. God wants you to be sexually pure. But God's not going to make you sexually pure. You have to make yourself sexually pure. Right? You'll do that out of your relationship with God. You'll do that out of the Spirit of God, agreeing with the Spirit of God that He's put inside of you. You'll do that by feeding yourself the Word of God and getting discernment and understanding about this kind of matter. But ultimately, this is something that rests on us. This is not something that God's going to do for us. We have to keep ourselves sexually pure. And so, I probably don't need to say that, but at the same point in time, in our church, but at the same point in time, there's so many people who get, such goofy notions about what grace does. The way that you'll hear some preachers talk about grace, they act like it's a power. God's grace is some kind of power, and it floats around and it gets inside of you and it makes things happen. And that's not what God's grace is. God's grace is talking about an attitude that God has toward us. So it's not a mysterious power that's going out making things happen. That's the Holy Spirit. What God's grace is a word that tells you what's in God's heart concerning you. God has this kind, compassionate, joyful care for you. That's grace. And so God's grace doesn't accomplish anything for you, in the sense that it has some kind of disembodied power away from the Lord. It's just the way that God is looking at you. It's what's in God's heart towards you. It's the disposition of God towards you. Grace. He has this kind, caring, compassionate, and it's joyful. God, all of these things are packed into the concept in the Greek, in the root of the word for grace, which is charis. But all of this comes together in just bringing out a picture of what God's heart is. So, is God's heart going to do things for you? No. God's heart is going to help you. God's heart is going to forgive you. God's heart is going to instruct you. God's heart is going to encourage you. But at the end of the string of things, we still have to make our will come into agreement with the will of God. We still have to agree with God. And that's what faith is for. I mean, we agree with God, and we act out of that agreement, and that's what's intended here. So the action in this is ours rather than God's. And I end up this section with this little line here that makes sense, I think. Sexual purity doesn't happen by accident. I'm always amazed, right? You'll get, some big name celebrity in the church world, and the headlines will come out, they had an affair, or they fell to sexual impurity, or whatever it might be, and more often than not all the time, but more often than not, you'll get the response or the reaction of that person to this, this information that's come out, and they'll say, I couldn't help myself, or it just got the best of me, and they'll go on talking about things as if somehow or another, sexual relations happen by accident. They don't happen by accident. And you're not walking down the street and next thing you know, you just tripped into it and you were having sexual relations. You know, it doesn't happen that way. It takes some effort. You know, it takes some time. It's not something that happens by accident. And neither is staying pure. It's not something that happens by accident. It's something that happens by choice. And we need to make faith choices. Choices informed by our faith in God. Because we trust Him, we want to be in His will, we make choices that are informed by that faith. And that's it. Any questions on this particular information on the slide? What's the bottom line right there at the bottom? God's will is that we keep ourselves sexually pure. Means if you're not married, no sex. If you are married, sex with your husband, with your wife, and nobody else. Right? All right. Then we go to this one. This comes out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. So we like this book, I guess. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So you have these little phrases here. Rejoice always, pray continually. The verbal phrases. Give thanks in all circumstances. Now, grammatically, it is possible to see this in like three different ways. It's possible to see this as that rejoice always stands alone, and it's possible to see that pray continually stands alone, and then it's possible to see that give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God, stands alone. So in other words, when it talks about the will of God there, it is grammatically permissible to see that as only referring to giving thanks. Why would that be not as good a way of seeing this? Well, a couple of reasons. First, the prayer and giving thanks being part of what God wants us to do is connected in several other passages, and we see those up here. I'll read a couple of those at least for you. There's, what, 3 there? Let's see if I can knock out at least a couple of them. We'll put that in there. Philippians. All right, here's the first one. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. See, the concept of prayer and thanksgiving are connected. And then in Colossians 4:2, it says this: devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Okay? So you see that combination of prayer and thanksgiving put together in that place. And then finally, I'll go to 1 Timothy here, chapter 2, verse number 1. I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people. So what we see is that very often the Apostle Paul, when he's writing about the concept of prayer and the concept of thanksgiving, he'll connect them together in the same usage, almost as if they go together, and they're meant to go together. So they're together in this passage, and so minimally, it's just rejoice. Minimally, it's just give thanks in all things. But it's probably, just because of how Paul uses these combinations, meant to include thanks. And since the format is exactly the same between one and the other, if you include thanks, right? Or if you include prayer with the thanksgiving, then you also have to include the rejoice. So it's possible to see it with all by itself, that God's will is being talked about here in regards to giving thanks. But because Paul often puts thanks with prayer, there's good reasons to think that he had that in mind in this passage. And because of the grammar puts the first phrase basically in equal treatment with the second phrase, if one goes with the thanksgiving, then the other one does too. So what am I saying? I'm saying that this whole thing should be considered the will of God, an expression of what the will of God for us is. Rejoice, right? Rejoice always. Rejoice, pray, and give thanks. So this is the will of God for us. When do you do this? When things are going right. When things are going horribly wrong. Oh yeah, then too. When things are really boring. Have you ever, been in a situation when you're so bored you just want to pull your hair out? Sometimes that kind of thing happens, if you're at a dance recital and you're waiting for your grandkids to come out and dance, and your mind's about ready to collapse into a big black pit because it goes on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then, in 2 or 3 minutes, what you've been there all that time is done, and it's like, now I can start thinking about getting out of here. But, no matter what the situation is, bad illustration, but that's the point, right? No matter what situation we're in, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what any other consideration, these things should be constant. Rejoicing, right? Praying, thanksgiving. This is just meant to be, in some respect, the fabric of our lives. This is what God's will for us. So, if we're walking through life, we're going to stumble, we're going to stub our toes, we're going to walk into walls, and we're going to be accosted by lions and bears, maybe a few tigers as well. If you're in Fleetwood anyhow, right? We're just going to have a variety of experiences, and a lot of them are not going to be all that pleasant. But no matter what we are walking through in life, God wants us to walk through life with an attitude that is always looking to Him in these kinds of expressions, because these are all expressions, right? Rejoicing is an expression. You're expressing your happiness and joy, and prayer is an expression. You're expressing, your heart, your communication to God, and thanks is an expression. You're making your gratitude known. So, it's God's will that as we walk through life, these expressions would be something that's always there. And he uses the concept of always differently. He uses always in the first phrase, that gets across the point, but he switches words in the second part, right? And says continually. Does that mean always? Yeah, right? Always, continually can be interchanged in certain contexts, right? And then he says, in all circumstances for thanksgiving. Does that mean always? Yeah, that does too. So the concept is the same all the way across. Yep.
Is that circumstances factors beyond willful control?
I would say yes, because he says all circumstances. So some of your circumstances will come upon you, they will visit you and you had no volition that made them happen. And sometimes it means that circumstances come upon you, and it's just, the cows coming home, right? It's just things that you had done before or had initiated now come back to haunt you, right? Some circumstances are like that. Some circumstances, you had a good plan, It was a good plan, not only from the standpoint of that it was well worked out, but it was also, good intention. But then it blew up, right? And the circumstance is like the last thing I expected was for this circumstance to be there. All of those circumstances, this should work. Now, you don't want to necessarily. Well, I would, let me take back the necessarily. You don't want to ever feel like you have to put on a mask before God to pull this off. So if you're in a situation, a circumstance that you're struggling with, and it's pretty hard to rejoice in it, something that you don't even know how to pray in, you certainly are not feeling very thankful about, how do you in that situation end up bringing this will of God into play? You could put on a smile and fake it. Sometimes I think that's what we're tempted to do as Christians, right? We know we're supposed to always kind of wear a smile, and so we'll put one on even if we don't feel it. But my thought is that if you don't feel it, then it's time to, pray, maybe even first. Don't start with rejoicing, don't start with thanksgiving. Start with praying, and praying about what you really feel. So, it's like, this situation stinks. This has me so upset. Maybe even, I am so angry, I don't know what to say. And if you're angry at God, I would even tell God that. Just honesty. And get something out in the open between you and God. Because once things are out in the open between you and God, then it seems like there's always an opportunity for the ministry of the Holy Spirit to come and bring a different perspective to you. So in those kinds of situations, you may be spending some time in prayer first, where you have to honestly get the beef out, get it off of your chest, get the cloud, get the shadow of the cloud, over your head, so that you can now, in a situation, say, but you're still God. You still love me. You still have a place for me in heaven. You don't get to that place, honestly, if your true feelings are just totally, if you just have a consternation inside of your heart over the circumstance that you're in. So sometimes what I'm saying is not something that instantaneously pops out of you. Right? Because sometimes things are just that rotten. That's not what's instantaneously capable of popping out of you. Maybe in some moments, right, the thing that's instantaneously able to pop out of you is, that kind of frustration and anger that you might feel. But it's always good to be honest with God. It's always good to open up your heart and be honest with God. If you're taking issue with something that He's led you into, or the way something turned out to be totally unexpected, or even that something that was even in your mind led by God. You did this because God told you to do it, and then, boom, it totally crashes and burns. It's better to find the place where there's some level of calmness after you've laid out your complaint to the Lord. We get to complain to the Lord. I mean, if that's the only thing you do with God, that's a problem. Right? But if you have an actual complaint, it's better to be honest with that about God and deal with it than it is to act like it isn't there and harbor some kind of resentment toward God. Because if you're harboring a resentment underneath it all toward God, you're not going to rejoice. And you're not going to thank God. And if you do something that could be labeled that, it's not going to be sincere. And honestly, if it's not sincere, then it's really not that, right? If the rejoicing isn't sincere, is it really rejoicing? If the thanks aren't really sincere, are they thanks? No, they're just empty words. So this part of God's will, this can present a serious test to us, and it can take a little bit of soul work. To bring yourself into God's will concerning this. But the thing that you need to know is that it is actually God's will. God's will is that we are always rejoicing, praying, and giving thanks. And there are moments in always, because always means all the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean every second. Because some seconds, you're a human being and you just got things you have to deal with. So you want to keep that within a confined or constrained time stretch so that always still exists, right? The overall tenor is rejoicing, prayer, thanksgiving, even if in moments there are things that you are working through with God so that you can get into the modality that is meant to be your constant or consistent. Does that make sense? All right. Anything else on this slide? Yep.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Hiding Place.
I may have. I read the book.
Corey Ten Boom,
Yeah.
And I think they may have been using that particular scripture. They're reading in the, as they're in the
Concentration camp.
And the one person said, "How can you give thanks for this lice?" And I think it was her sister Betsy said, "Well, because of the lice, the guards won't come in here and we can have our Bible studies." So that's the way she looked at it, giving thanks in all circumstances. So
See, now that embarrasses me so bad, because I wouldn't be complaining about it.
I thought that's pretty cool.
That is,
Yeah.
very much so. Anything else on this slide? Huh, that was a good slide, I guess. And then this is the final slide in this first section, the general notion of the will of God. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. So this is the summary concluding statement on all the detail that went before it. It's all inclusive. Because he says, whether you eat or drink, well, that seems kind of limited. But then he goes and says, whatever you do. So then he goes and opens it up and spreads it out to anything that you might do. So this is one of the broadest areas of application that we have in the New Testament scriptures there. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31 NIV. So it's all inclusive so far as our actions and volitions. What do I mean by actions and volitions? Well, volitions are those things that come out of your determination, the will that you have inside. So if we say something is volitional, it means you had the ability to make a decision about it. You opted for that. You exercise will. Okay? And so all the things that are in our purview, all the things that we have that are given to us in our freedom, in the image of God, walking around as human beings, all those things that we make choices about. All of these things come under this. Whatever decision you make. It can be a decision to go to this place or go to that place. It can be a decision to hang out with these people or that people. It can be a decision to do this thing or do that thing. Whatever decision, whatever aspect of your volition that you exercise in your humanity, every single one of them, every single one, whatever you do, all inclusive. So it means that we are concerned, if we are concerned with the will of God for our lives, we are concerned with glorifying God on much more than Sundays. That's kind of an old-fashioned notion, right? We used to have nothing open on Sundays. Everyone would dress up and go to church. You had your Sunday best on, for Sundays. People that would cuss up a storm on Saturday, backwards to Monday. Try to, not cuss so much on a Sunday. All kinds of, you didn't beat the dog. Didn't beat the dog, didn't kick the kids. Oh, reverse that. You behaved on Sunday, right? Because you had, that was a day for glorifying God. Well, you know what? Every day is a day for glorifying God. And every second, every moment that we're alive is a time for glorifying God. Whatever we do, that is just, it's such a privilege to be a human being. I came up Pottenstein today, and there was 3 stupid deer standing out in the middle of the road. And they're like standing there, and my car's getting closer and closer to them, and I don't trust deer. They are stupid. They do things that are completely unexpected and illogical, but they're just standing there. And so I honk, and one of them goes off into the cornfield. I'm like, okay, one down. The other 2 start moving parallel with the road. So I honk again, and the second one gets a clue and goes off into the cornfield, and I'm good. The third stupid deer, he must have gone on for another 50 yards, just walking up the edge of Pottenstein Road. I'm like, are you ever going to leave? Because I didn't dare go around him, because the minute, you get near him, you're like squirrels.
Yeah.
Squirrels are not nearly as dangerous, because he just, thump, thump, and you go on. But deer can do some serious damage, so it's like volition. All of our choices, all of our acts of will, and all of the things that we end up doing as a result of our will, all of these are included in this particular statement. It's all inclusive. This is a motto, I say, that we can live by. So if you want something really simple to gauge what's God's will for my life, this would be the one. Right? Something simple, memorable, something you can carry with you at all times, something you can apply in every situation and circumstance, right? Whatever you're going to do, no matter what, no matter where, no matter with whom, everything you're going to do, does it glorify God? Right? You can take that and walk through life. You'll do well. You'll do well if you walk through life with that as your model. Right? So that's it. Specifics fall out or under the generality. So all of those specifics, even that we looked at before, we talked about that it's God's will, for instance, to keep sexually pure, and we talked about God's will in rejoicing and thanks. Those were very specific things. This thing is more general, and that's why it's a good way to kind of summarize everything that goes into this general understanding of God's will. God's will for us is to know His will. We should know God's will. That's God's intent for us. And really, when it comes down to it, if you're going to put it forth in the most simplest way possible, we should know God's will. God's will is this: everything we say and do